Right now, somewhere in a garage, there is a Toyota engine built in 1993 making more power than a brand new supercar. Nobody replaced the block. Nobody touched the crankshaft. Somebody bolted on a bigger turbo and turned the boost up. That's it. That's the entire recipe. That engine is the 2JZ, and it isn't even the strangest thing on this list. For about 15 years, Japanese manufacturers built engines that made no financial sense at all. Hand-finished cylinder heads on a compact hatchback, sequential twin turbochargers on a rotary, 6 individual throttle bodies on what was technically a family sedan. A family sedan, man. The kind of car you take to a parent-teacher conference. These were not one-off halo projects. They went into showrooms, with warranties. Today, I am breaking down the 7 engines that defined that era. What makes each one work, why it was built, and why almost none of them could exist now. To understand any of this, you need to know about one agreement. In 1989, the Japan Automobile Manufacturers Association reached an understanding among its members. No production car sold in Japan would be advertised with more than 280 horsepower. It was framed as a safety measure. It was completely voluntary, and nobody outside the industry could enforce a word of it. So it was a safety rule that nobody had to follow, and nobody could check. You already know where this is going. The horsepower race stopped, officially. But here's the thing, okay? The race didn't stop. It just moved somewhere else. If you couldn't sell a bigger number on the brochure, you competed on how the power arrived instead. Throttle response, the shape of the torque curve, where the red line sat, how much abuse the engine would swallow before something let go. At the same time, these companies were fighting a second war in motorsport. Group A touring cars and the World Rally Championship both ran on homologation rules, which meant the racing engine had to be based on something a normal person could buy. If you wanted to win on Sunday, you had to sell civilians a race engine on Monday. Now add the tail end of Japan's bubble economy, when engineering budgets were enormous and nobody was asking hard questions about return on investment. Nobody was asking questions at all. You end up with a very short window where some of the best engine designers in the world were told to build whatever it took. That window closed 20 years ago. The engines are still here. Let's start with the smallest one. Number 7. The Toyota 4AGE. In 1983, most affordable cars had 8 valves, 1 camshaft, and a carburetor bolted on top. That was normal. Nobody thought anything of it. Toyota released a 1.6-liter 4-cylinder with twin overhead camshafts, 16 valves, and electronic fuel injection. They cast the words Twin Cam 16 into the cam cover in red lettering because they wanted you to know. Not a sticker, not a stamp, cast into the metal. Toyota wanted you to pop the hood and immediately understand the situation. Yamaha had a hand in developing the cylinder head, and it shows in how the thing breathes. Toyota also fitted a variable intake system that used a butterfly valve to switch between long runners at low RPM for torque and short runners at high RPM for flow. In Japanese specification, it made around 130 horsepower. That number sounds small. It was never the point. The 4AGE went into the Corolla 11 and the Sprinter Trueno, the cars everyone now calls the AE86. It also went into the first-generation MR2. These were light cars. Rear-wheel drive. A chassis that told you exactly what it was doing, and an engine that pulled hard all the way to the top of the tachometer. Then Toyota kept developing it long after they had any real reason to. In 1991 came the 20-valve version, 5 valves per cylinder, with a set of individual throttle bodies sitting on top. Around 160 horsepower from 1.6 naturally aspirated liters, spinning past 7,800 RPM. In 1995, they revised it again and got roughly 165. Individual throttle bodies on a Corolla engine. Sit with that one for a second. The 4AGE became legendary because of what it enabled rather than what it produced. Keiichi Tsuchiya learned to drift on mountain roads in an AE86. The manga and anime that grew out of that culture put the car in front of millions of people who had never seen a Japanese hatchback in their lives. Clean AE86 prices went from scrap value to absurd. The engine that started all of it makes less power than a modern hot hatch makes at idle. It still commands respect because balance ages better than horsepower. Number 6. The Honda B18C. Honda spent the 1980s obsessed with a problem that seems obvious now. A camshaft profile is a compromise. A gentle lobe gives you a smooth idle. Good torque down low, decent fuel economy. An aggressive lobe holds the valve open longer and further, which lets the engine breathe at high RPM, but makes it rough and gutless at the bottom. Every engine designer had to pick one. Honda decided to fit both. Honda just refused to choose. The system is called VTEC, and the mechanical trick behind it is simple enough to explain in a sentence. Each cylinder has an extra rocker arm riding on an aggressive cam lobe, doing nothing at low RPM. Past a set engine speed, the computer sends oil pressure to a small pin that slides across and locks the rocker arms together. The aggressive lobe takes over instantly, and the engine changes character mid-pull. It's a pin. The single most worshipped thing in Honda history is a pin sliding sideways. The first production version arrived in 1989 in the 1.6-liter B18C. It made 160 horsepower without a turbocharger, which was 100 horsepower per liter, in a car people bought to commute in. The peak of the family came in 1995 with the B18C fitted to the Integra Type R. Honda took the 1.8-liter block and treated it like a race engine. Higher compression, more aggressive cams, a crankshaft that was balanced rather than just assembled, lighter flywheel, revised intake manifold, exhaust ports that were finished by hand at the factory by workers trained to do it. Somebody's actual job title was porting Integra heads by hand. That was a career. The result was 197 horsepower at 8,000 RPM with a red line at 8,400. That is roughly 109 horsepower per liter, naturally aspirated, in a front-wheel drive road car from 1995. Ferrari was not far ahead of that number at the time. The Type R was more than the engine. Honda seam-welded the shell, added a helical limited-slip differential, and stripped weight out of the car. But the engine is the part people still talk about, because of what happens above 5,700 RPM, when the second cam profile engages, and the whole thing seems to find another set of lungs. 30 years later, B-Series engines still show up in time attack cars and in SWAT builds all over the world. Not because they make big power, because they make their power in a way nothing else does. Number 5. The Nissan SR20DET. Some engines are legendary because of what they achieved in competition. This one is legendary because of what it survived. The SR20DET is a 2.0-liter turbocharged four-cylinder with a cast-iron block and an aluminum twin-cam head. It arrived in 1991 in the Silvia, and it stayed in production through 3 generations of that car, plus the 180SX. Nissan kept turning the output up over the years. The early version made around 205 horsepower. By the time the final Silvia arrived in 1999, the Spec R version was rated at 250. There was also a wilder homologation variant fitted to the Pulsar GTI-R, a rally special with all-wheel drive and roughly 230 horsepower crammed into a tiny hatchback. None of that is why the SR20 matters. The engine matters because of the chassis it lived in, rear-wheel drive, near-even weight distribution, and a price that made it the default choice for anyone in Japan who wanted to go sideways on purpose. The Silvia became the drift car, and the SR20 became the drift engine. That created a feedback loop. Because everyone used it, everyone made parts for it. Because everyone made parts for it, it got cheaper to modify. Because it got cheaper to modify, more people used it. The engine itself was well-suited to the job. It has a broad, forgiving spread of torque, an iron block that tolerates heat and boost far past its rated output, and a turbocharger response that lets you meter power precisely with your right foot, instead of waiting for a wall of boost to arrive. Drifting is a sport where you are constantly adjusting power in tiny increments. The SR20 was built for a completely different purpose, and happened to be brilliant at that. You know the guy. He's got 2 spare blocks sitting under a tarp in his garage, and a very firm opinion about which one is the good one. Ask anyone who competed in the 2000s what they blew up, rebuilt, and blew up again. The answer is usually this engine. Number 4. The Mitsubishi 4G63T. This one was forged in the worst conditions on Earth, and it shows. The 4G63 started life as an unremarkable 2.0-liter four-cylinder. Mitsubishi turbocharged it, put it in the Galant VR4 in 1987, and then discovered they had built something far tougher than they needed. That is a nice problem to have. In 1992, they dropped it into a compact sedan called the Lancer Evolution, and spent the next 13 years refining it, while the car went to war in the World Rally Championship. Rally is a brutal environment for an engine. Full throttle, then nothing, then full throttle again, thousands of times per stage, with dust and gravel and altitude changes and no time to cool down. It's the worst job an engine can be given. Mitsubishi responded with an iron block, a forged crankshaft, and a bottom end designed with margin nobody would ever admit to on paper. Officially, every evolution from the 4th generation onward made exactly 280 horsepower, because of that gentleman's agreement. Independent testing suggested otherwise. Consistently. Shocker. The results speak clearly enough. Tommi Mäkinen won 4 consecutive World Rally Championship drivers' titles from 1996 to 1999 in a Lancer Evolution. Mitsubishi built a road-going tribute edition, the Evolution 6 Tommi Mäkinen edition, fitted with a titanium aluminide turbine wheel that spooled faster than steel could, on a road car, in 1999. The final versions added variable valve timing to widen the torque band even further. But the legend is really about the bottom end. Tuners discovered that the 4G63 would hold 500 horsepower on factory internals with reasonable care, and considerably more with a fuel system and proper management. Drag racers built 4-cylinder Evolutions that ran quarter-mile times that embarrassed cars with twice the displacement. Mitsubishi retired the 4G63 in 2007 and replaced it with an aluminum block engine that was lighter, cleaner, and more efficient. Almost nobody in the tuning world considered that an upgrade. If you are getting something out of this, hit subscribe. I break down engines and the cars they went into every week. 3 left. And the next one doesn't have pistons. Number 3. The Mazda 13B REW. Every other engine on this list works the same fundamental way. A piston goes up and down inside a cylinder, connected to a crankshaft that turns the motion into rotation. Mazda decided that was an unnecessary step. Inside a rotary engine, there is a curved, triangular rotor spinning inside an oval-shaped housing, mounted on an eccentric shaft. As the rotor turns, the space between each of its 3 faces and the housing wall grows and shrinks. That changing volume does the whole job. One face draws in air and fuel, the next compresses it, the next fires, the next pushes exhaust out. There are no valves. There is no valve train. There is no reciprocating mass slamming to a stop and reversing direction thousands of times per minute. Combustion pressure pushes directly on a spinning component. The sealing job is handled by apex seals at each tip of the rotor, riding against the housing surface. The 13B uses 2 rotors with chambers of 654 cc each. On paper, that is 1.3 liters, which is why the Japanese tax system loved it. Officially, a very sensible little engine. The final and best version arrived in 1991 in the 3rd generation RX-7. Mazda fitted 2 turbochargers arranged sequentially. The smaller one spools almost immediately for low RPM response. Around 4,500 RPM, the second one comes online and takes over. It was the first mass-produced sequential twin turbocharger system in the world, and it worked well enough that Toyota copied the concept. Output started at 255 horsepower and climbed to 280 by the final Spirit R edition in 2002. The bigger advantage was packaging. The engine is physically tiny and light, compared to a piston 6 making similar power, and Mazda mounted it low and behind the front axle line. The car weighed around 1,300 kilograms, with close to perfect balance. I should be honest about the trade. Rotaries consume oil by design, drink fuel, and apex seals wear out. Owning one is a commitment. Ask an owner about it and watch what happens to his face. But Mazda proved the concept mattered. In 1991, a 4-rotor prototype won the 24 Hours of Le Mans outright. That was the only Japanese victory in the race for the next 27 years, and the only rotary win in history. Number 2. The Nissan RB26DETT. This engine was not designed to sell cars. It was designed to win a championship, and the rulebook wrote half the specification. Group A touring car regulations calculated the effective size of a turbocharged engine by multiplying its actual displacement by 1.7. Which class you landed in determined your minimum weight, and, critically, how wide your tires could be. Nissan's engineers worked backwards. They wanted the widest tires allowed under the 4.5-liter ceiling. Multiply 2.6 liters by 1.7, and you get 4.42, just underneath. That is why the RB26 displaces an unusual 2.6 liters. It is a number reverse engineered from a regulation. That isn't an engineering figure. That's a math homework answer. Everything else followed from the same logic. Twin turbochargers to spread the load rather than one large unit. 6 individual throttle bodies, 1 per cylinder, for razor-sharp response. Oil squirters spraying the underside of the pistons for cooling. An iron block that could handle far more than it was ever asked to. Nissan rated it at 280 horsepower, in line with the agreement. Independent measurements at the time landed closer to 320. Everybody made 280. Nobody made 280. Then they put it in the R32 Skyline GTR with all-wheel drive and 4-wheel steering and sent it racing. The R32 GTR won all 29 races it entered in the Japanese Touring Car Championship between 1990 and 1993. It also went to Australia and beat the local V8 heroes at Bathurst, which is where the Australian press started calling it Godzilla. The nickname stuck so completely that most people now think Nissan came up with it. Best free marketing in motorsport history, handed over by the people it just beat. The engine stayed in production through 3 generations of GTR until 2002. Nissan also sold a strengthened block through their racing division, which tuners bought specifically to build engines that made 2 and 3 times the factory output. 6 individual throttle bodies is the detail that gives it away. That is an expensive, complicated, difficult-to-emissions certify solution to a problem you could solve with a single throttle body and a good intake manifold. They did it anyway, because response mattered more than cost. Number 1. The Toyota 2JZ GTE. Toyota built this engine to compete with Mercedes and BMW in the luxury market. It ended up as the most transplanted performance engine on the planet. The 2JZ is a 3.0-liter twin-turbocharged inline-6, 6 cylinders in a row, is inherently the smoothest configuration in engine design, because the firing forces balance themselves out without counterweights or balance shafts. It is also long, it's heavy, and it is a nightmare to package, which is why almost nobody builds them anymore. The specification reads like something from a much more expensive car. A cast iron block with a closed deck, meaning the top of the block is solid metal with holes for the cylinders, rather than open coolant passages. A forged steel crankshaft running in 7 main bearings. Bore and stroke both measuring 86 millimeters. Sequential turbochargers, using the same principle Mazda pioneered. Japanese market cars were rated at 280 horsepower. Export versions with larger turbochargers and a freer exhaust were rated at 320. Then the tuning industry got hold of it and found something Toyota had not advertised. The bottom end was massively overbuilt. Not slightly, enormously. Builders discovered that with a single large turbocharger, a proper fuel system, and standalone engine management, the 2JZ would reliably make 700 to 800 horsepower on completely untouched factory internals. The same pistons, the same rods, the same crankshaft that left the factory in 1994. Nobody has ever fully explained why. The most common theory is that Toyota engineered for a much higher output variant that never reached production, and simply left the margin in. Somebody signed off on that and went home. That single property is the reason the 2JZ became a global phenomenon. It is the cheapest known route to serious power. People put them in Mustangs, BMWs, Ferraris, boats, and at least one lawn tractor that I am aware of. When the Supra appeared in a film about street racing in 2001, an entire generation learned the name of an engine before they learned to drive. Toyota ended production in 2002. Prices for clean examples have gone up every year since. So what actually killed all of this? Partly emissions regulation, which made individual throttle bodies and high-compression naturally aspirated engines difficult to certify. Partly the economics, because iron blocks with excess material are heavy, and weight is now the enemy of every fuel consumption figure. Partly the collapse of the racing formulas that forced manufacturers to sell homologation specials to the public in the first place. The 280 horsepower agreement was quietly abandoned around 2004, and by then, the culture that made it interesting had already moved on. There are engines that deserved a place here and did not get one. Subaru's Flat 4 and Rally specification. The Honda F20C, which revved to 9,000 RPM in a convertible. Not a track car, a convertible. The K20A that replaced the B series. The aluminum V6 in the original NSX, developed with input from a Formula One world champion. What all of them share is a specific set of conditions that no longer exists. Enormous budgets, rules that rewarded engineering excess, and a group of manufacturers who genuinely could not stand losing to each other. Modern engines are better in nearly every measurable way. More efficient, more reliable, cleaner, more powerful per liter. They are also designed by committees optimizing for regulations, rather than by engineers optimizing for a lap time. That is the difference you can hear. Subscribe, and next week I am covering the engines that Japan built, but never officially sold outside the country. Some of them make this list look conservative.